We've talked about safety a lot, and I've been careful about what I've said because I'm not an expert in safety by any means, and we rely on industry experts to help us with our safety programs. But I think that we've gotten to a point where I'm happy with our safety. I think we do a good job of it, and I wanted to share a few things that we think are important that we focus on. Obviously, safety is always a work in progress. You're always going to have safety violations. People are going to forget. Hopefully, you keep your accidents to a minimum and they're not severe, but that's just life and that happens. One thing that you have to remember is that safety is not something that you can just like put in place and then forget about it. Something you got to talk about on a regular basis. You got to keep bringing it up. It's got to be at the front of everybody's mind. Otherwise, it just gets forgotten about. It's easier to talk about it consistently on a regular basis and keep it fresh in everyone's mind than to talk about it once a year and then let it go by the wayside the rest of the year. Because it's hard to get people in a rhythm of doing it the way they're supposed to if you're only talking about it once a year. They think that you're not that serious about it. So for us in the finishing industry, there's obviously all kinds of stuff that OSHA can come in and inspect. So you have to do your research on that and make sure that your shop is covered on that. But in general, what I feel like are our biggest things that if we're doing those right, we've at least got some of the big stuff out of the way. So it's not going to be so painstakingly obvious that we have no idea what we're doing. You know, these are the things that I think need to be focused on. So you have a majority of the pain points covered, if you will, in terms of safety. First is PPE. Seems simple, but safety glasses, earplugs, work boots, gloves, those things are easy for people to forget, but once you get in the habit, it's easy. People don't want to wear earplugs, but once you get in the habit, it's easy. People don't want to wear gloves, but once you get in the habit, it's easy. The PPE is just a habitual thing that you got to get people used to. And over time, everybody will start utilizing the PPE and they'll start calling out each other and saying, hey, where's your safety glasses? You forgot to put them on. Hey, you should have earplugs on when you're blowing the booth down with air because that's too loud. So for one, it's just making sure you provide all the PPE that they need and listing it out and explaining to everybody why are we using it, what are we trying to protect, why is it important, and then just following up with it, making sure that when they are out on the shop floor, do they have their safety glasses on all the time? If they do, great. If they don't, they need to be reminded. Do they have gloves on when they're hanging or handling sharp parts? Do they have gloves on when they're handling chemicals? Second big one for us in the finishing industry is respirators. This is a huge one. We work hard to try to keep everybody's respirator clean and keep the filters changed on a regular basis. This was very difficult during the height of COVID because it was really hard to get filters. So we try to clean respirators once a week at our Wednesday safety meetings that we do in the mornings. Everybody's responsible for their own, cleaning their own. You would think that everybody would care enough to keep their own respirator clean, but that's not the case. We'll touch on that a little bit more here in a minute. And then the second thing is we change filters at Wednesday meeting. So typically respirator filters are rated for a certain amount of hours of actual breathing time. I don't know the exact for every single respirator, but let's just say it's 24 hours of breathing time, just for example. So that would be 24 hours straight of breathing. So if someone had it on for 8 hours, their entire 8-hour shift, that would last 3 days. More than likely, they only have it on for about half their shift, so that lasts 6 days. That's how we come up with about a week. We change filters every week. It's important to keep respirators stowed away when they're not being used. That way the filters aren't constantly filtering air, even when they're not on them, on your mouth, on your face. So we stow them away when we're not using them, keep them in a safe place. Even if we have somebody that's going to be like, I'm prepping right now, but now I'm going to go to lunch, or I'm going to go somewhere else in the shop and package when I'm not prepping, we try to make sure that everybody puts their respirator away in their locker so it's not sitting out, so something doesn't get spilled on it, so it doesn't get crunched or run over, doesn't get dirty, the filters don't continue to get worn out. So we try to get people to be very careful with their respirators and watch after them. And if they're not on their face, we always say put it away. If it's not on your face, put it away. The cleaning of the respirators, one thing that I've realized that even if you have a real good safety program laid out, even if you have regular intervals where you're having people do things, that's still typically not good enough. You have to take it the extra mile and have extra checklists and double check and physically verify. Someone in the safety program needs to physically verify, like, is this clean? Meaning, like, I see that you're over there wiping it down, but are you taking it all the way apart and cleaning all of it? Or when I look inside, is there still junk in there somewhere? Still nastiness? Does it smell absolutely terrible? I had a respirator fit test that you have to do as well. And we have to renew those once a year. And typically, then I'm actually physically looking at the respirator, checking it over. That's part of the fit test process. Let's make sure that there's nothing damaged. If there is, let's replace it. And so, physically looking over, and I looked inside of one and like caught a whiff of the respirator that was supposed to be getting cleaned every week, and I like almost threw up in my mouth. That's how bad it was. I'm like, all right, let's throw this one away and get you a new one. And then I dawned on me, like, okay, I know that we're taking the time to clean these every week, and I know this person was cleaning it. Like, I've watched them clean it, but they're just not taking it to the level of cleanliness that it needs to be. So we've added in kind of an inspection portion to that somebody else, not the person that actually is cleaning it and putting it on their own face. You would think that they would try really hard to keep it clean, because why would you want something nasty on your own face that you're breathing in? But it happens. So trying to have another person around to check, like a safety director, to say, like, is this actually meeting a standard of cleanliness? Or, do you need to clean it more? Or is it so far gone that we need to get rid of it and get you a new one? The one thing that I try to remind all of our team members about their respirators is, if it's not clean, or if you're sick, and you go home sick, and you come back the next day and you don't clean it, you're going to get yourself sick again. Like, you're wearing it right there. All your germs are right there in the mask. You need to keep that clean on a regular basis. And especially if you're sick, clean it really well the next time that you put it on. Otherwise, you're just going to keep contaminating yourself, if you will. One huge thing on respirators that's really hard, and I would assume it's the same for everybody, is that everybody needs to be clean shaven around the sealing surface of the respirator. So typically a sealing surface is around here for like a half face. For a full face, it's going to be around basically your entire face. So with a full face, you pretty much have to be 100% clean shaven. For a half face, is if you have a mustache or something in here, you're usually okay because the sealing surface is out here. We have a really hard time with everybody remembering to be clean shaven. They know. It's not that they don't remember. They just don't want to take the time to do it. Technically, need to be like clean shaven every morning, no stubble. That is the definition that OSHA likes to use, and rightfully so, because if you have something on your face, like facial hair, obviously your respirator is not going to seal the way it should. So you're going to be breathing in some chemical, and your respirator isn't going to be able to do its job because you don't have a good seal there. So that's a hard one for us, especially in the finishing industry. A lot of people have facial hair and like their beards, but for respirators, you need to be clean shaven around the sealing surface. We have tried to start a rewards program to try to reward the people that are clean shaven, try to encourage people that are not always clean shaven to try harder, because there's a reward there now. However, still not progressing like I would like, so we're going to continue to try to work on that. It's really for all the guys' safety. Like, we're around chemicals quite a bit when we're doing prep work. I need that respirator to be sealed for them so they're not breathing in the chemical and getting themselves headaches and getting sick. The third, and I'm just going to say final, most important thing that we really focus on is this hazard communication about chemicals that we have in the shop. We use methyl ethyl ketone, or MEK, as a prep chemical to get nasty greases and oils, typically silicone based, off of parts before we get into the wash bay. Extremely important to wear the proper PPE when you're using those type of chemicals. Extremely important to handle rags that are soaked in those chemicals. You're supposed to handle those rags in a certain way, and store and stow the gallons of chemical in a certain way. So we're very particular on that. Try to communicate with everybody what's in that chemical, that it's potent, and how to handle it and how to make sure that you don't start a fire because it's very, very flammable. So typically, if we're using a chemical can, say it's MEK and it's in a gallon rectangle can like most people are familiar with, and you pour that onto a rag so you can actually prep parts down. Of course, you have your chemical glove on, you have your respirator on. Our rule is if you're going to walk away from a rag and set it down, put it over the side of a trash can. Do not put that in the trash can in a pile. Do not pile it up on the floor. Do not set it on a rack. Because for one, we don't want sparks to get to that rag and catch it on fire. Two, we don't want a pile of solvent rags, because as the solvent evaporates, it creates heat, and then boom, can spontaneously combust and you have a fire. So we always hang rags over the side of the trash can, even if you're not done using it. If it's leaving your hand and you're not wiping anything anymore, it goes over the side of the trash can. The chemical can itself, lid is always on, always up in some sort of cart off the floor or back into the chemical cabinet if you're not going to be using it again in the next couple minutes. That way we can prevent spills, prevent cans from being totally crushed, prevent fires from happening. In addition to that, as a part of our HAZCOM process, we have all of our SDSs stored on the computer, very readily accessible for everybody to get access to. So every SDS for every powder, every paint, every chemical that we utilize, we have SDSs on the computer. You're supposed to make sure that everybody knows how to get to those and has easy access to SDSs. Why are those important? Really long documents are, just because employees have access to that, does that mean they're going and reading those all day, every day? Of course not. So why are those important? Well, the way I look at it is if there is an emergency, whether it's a fire or it's on somebody's skin and it's hurting their skin, it's burning them, it's been ingested, it's getting in eyes, it's gotten in ears, something. That SDS tells us what we need to do. How do we need to try to solve this problem? We've spilled a ton of it. How are we supposed to clean this up? If we're first using a chemical, what PP are we supposed to use? How potent is this chemical? All that information is on the SDS. So it's a good resource to go to in a time of need and emergency, the way I look at it. And when you're first dealing with a chemical, to figure out exactly what you're up against. When you get in a situation of a panic or an emergency, readily, quickly available SDSs is really important because that can help you quickly solve an emergency problem and solve it the correct way. So those are the three main things that we really, really harp on, we really focus on is PPE, respirators, and HAZCOM, because that really covers the bulk of what the guys are dealing with on the shop floor every day. Of course, there's a lot of other safety stuff that we cover at our weekly safety meetings, but those are the three main things. And I think for anybody in the finishing industry, those would be ones to look at. Because if you're doing those really, really well, a lot of the other safety stuff that's involved in the finishing industry kind of plays off of those three things. And so if those three things are done really well, and the guys know those like the back of their hand and participate in them and do a good job with them, then the rest of the safety stuff comes a little more naturally because it kind of all complements itself.